getting reactions now to the Prime Minister's budget presentation. Prime Minister Andrew Holness says an increase in the minimum wage is a necessary measure to keep those Jamaicans considered poor and vulnerable in line with inflation. The minimum wage is set to move to $15,000 effective June 1. That's a 15% increase, moving up from $13,000.
We thought about it very carefully and thought it was necessary to do to keep the working class and our poorest abreast with inflation. Madam Speaker, we have to look out for the poor and most vulnerable in the society. And you know, Madam Speaker, as we campaigned and we moved around the island, it was clear that many of our working poor were having it really difficult.
That's the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness. For reactions to the Prime Minister's budget presentations, we are joined by financial journalist Kalila Reynolds, political commentator Dr. Nadine Spence, and President of the Micro, Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise MSME Alliance, Donovan Wignall. Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen.
Good
morning, ladies.
And I want to start with Kalila Reynolds because, Kalila, I've been getting some messages and it's sometimes difficult to explain to people this matter of, and I'm going to start with the minimum wage. You know, there are messages that are saying to me, why can't it be increased to $25,000 a week? That will allow people to get by, is what someone is saying to me. And I want you, Kalila, as best you can, to explain the ramifications, if you will, of an increase in the minimum wage that would take it to $25,000.
Well, while that would be ideal, everybody would love it if they're guaranteed a minimum of $25,000 a week. You also have to look at it from the perspective of the employer. A lot of people who work minimum wage jobs are working jobs like helpers, gardeners, people who do odd jobs. And so if you raise it, you have to think, would you be willing to pay your helper, not just willing, but able to pay your helper $25,000 a week? I think most of us would be willing, but the ability to pay is the issue. This will have an impact on small businesses, micro businesses, people who hire people at the minimum wage level. And so if it is raised to something like $25,000 too rapidly, that may have implications for the number of workers that a business is able to employ. Because if I used to employ two people at $15,000 a week each, and now it's gone to 25, that is almost the cost of the two people. And so I may have to let go one.
Yeah. Donovan Wignall, for micro, small and medium-sized businesses, what would be the effect of that?
Well, definitely increase the operating expenses of a business. But the truth be told, Ricardo, we're already there. A lot of us are paying above the minimum wage already because you have to pay reasonable wages to keep the workers. And with the employment environment over the last couple of months, if you don't pay your workers a reasonable wage, they're going to leave you. Mm-hmm. So my response is we're already there. If it went up to 25, and I agree with Kalila and saying that it's all good and well. 25, might be a good number, but whether or not we can afford it.
But as it relates, Mr. Wignall, to what the Prime Minister said yesterday, it being $15,000 as of June 1st, your reaction to that specifically?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, we're already there. It's a good thing for the workers, for, household help and gardeners, etc. Fine. Now you'd have to find the additional $3,000 to pay them, and that is going to be the law at that time. It is going to be increased expenses for households, and for those businesses that are not paying, for those businesses who are paying minimum wage, would have to, to be within the law, have to increase their wages to $15,000. So it's going to be additional expenses.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah, I thought it important to just ask you both that question. After the break, we'll bring in Dr. Spence now, and we'll have a full discussion about what you heard in the Parliament yesterday. Our guest this morning, founder of Money Media, Kalila Reynolds, political commentator Dr. Nadine Spence, and the president of the Micro, Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise MSME Alliance, Donovan Wignall. Dr. Spence, did the Prime Minister hit the points that you were expecting? When we spoke yesterday morning, you said he had to speak to those at the base of the society. Are you satisfied with what you heard?
More than that, I think one of the things that struck me about his presentation was that he did delay himself with what took place in the Parliament on Tuesday. And, that he proceeded to clearly outline what a very detailed and long presentation. All the things that he clearly wanted to say prior to that. So that struck me, and that it seemed to have changed the tone of the conversation very much. So I think in a lot of ways he's put the ball back in his own court. I think one of the things the Prime Minister did yesterday was he outlined, one of the things he outlined clearly the government's attempts at dealing with this matter of the poorest and most vulnerable, and how they feel about hearing about Jamaica's recovery and Jamaica doing well. And I think he did a very good job of outlining how the economy has been doing well, but also to deal with the misinterpretation that is out there in the public, that it's only macroeconomic growth that we are seeing, and that there is no attempt to share this prosperity with other people. And I liked his presentation as well on his government's philosophy on trickle-down economics, because we've been hearing that more and more in the public conversation, and that the government is hoping that trickle-down economics will work. But he dealt with that, making it clear that he did not believe, nor did the JLP government believe, in trickle-down economics. I thought he did a very good job with this whole conversation on productivity and the low-wage trap.
Yes.
And I think for those people who were listening, they would have got a really good understanding of how the matter of productivity is critical to this idea of us moving from a low-wage economy to, even moving through the process to becoming even an economy where wages are not as low as they are now. I also liked his presentation on slipping me right now. But there are several things in there that
it was 5 hours, I understand.
That I listened to and I was excited about.
Yes.
He spoke to crime, which I was listening for, and thought, when he said it, it was quite stark to think that we are experiencing what we are experiencing now. I mean, our crime rate is still high, but we are seeing a trend down in crime, and we are seeing the investment, and we've been hearing about the investment, but up until now we haven't managed to use that to pepper our discourse or our understanding of how the systematic the government has been. I know this because I'm on the CMOC, and I know that, while all the targets haven't been hit, there's been a lot of investment in crime fighting, and not in the traditional way we've heard and seen it. So I think it was a very good presentation. I think it was sober. I think it had a lot of, it was long, was very long. It had a lot of analysis in it that, can see us if we truly desire to change the public discourse so that we lend greater clarity to the conversation about what is happening to our economy. I'll remember more and more as the conversation progresses.
And Kalila Reynolds, do you think it went far enough in bridging that divide that we've been hearing about between the macro successes and the people not feeling it? What do you make of the policy initiatives, the specific ones that stood out to you? Do you think those went any way in bridging that divide?
Well, I certainly applaud the social programs and the social initiatives that were mentioned, such as the CARE program, making sure that students who are on HART, have that stipend for transportation to school, because that is a barrier to them even accessing the benefit, getting money for even lunch, the Hope Trust Fund for children on the PATH program as well, which is a savings program, a long-term savings program for those children that they can access at the age of 18, even though I think it should be an investment program instead, an investment fund rather than savings. But you guys know how I feel about all of that. Yes. Everybody always listens out for NHT and what's happening with NHT. I applaud the innovation in coming with that NHT buyback clause for those one-bedroom apartments within or near urban centers, so that if you sell it back to the NHT after a certain period, you still get to keep your NHT benefit and use that towards a new purchase, whereas normally if you sell that property, you lose the benefit because you already accessed it once. You can't access it really again. So I applaud those initiatives, absolutely. And then the $1 trillion in infrastructure development between public and private partnerships in 5 years, that is going to transform this country very quickly and create a lot of jobs. However, I am disappointed that I didn't hear much for entrepreneurs and businesses in general, because entrepreneurs, business owners, we're the lifeblood of the economy. We create the jobs that we want to see. So I didn't hear much in terms of tax incentives, grant funding, low-interest loans for this sector of the society, because access to capital remains one of the biggest barriers to entrepreneurship. And right now, as you know, interest rates are very high. So if it's hard to get a loan, the rates are high, what incentives do we have to start or even continue a business or to invest in a business? So those are my highlights. There was a lot to be applauded, but that one disappointment for me.
And I imagine, Donovan Wignell, you share that disappointment.
My expectation was that he would have addressed the whole entrepreneurship landscape, the challenges we're having as entrepreneurs with low-interest loan financing in general. But outside of that disappointment, I think the presentation was good. It hit all the notes: education, low-income housing, social programs. He had it all. One of the benefits of being the last debater on the stage is that you get to address every single point raised by rebut every single point.
Well, he does have Nigel Clark.
Opponent.
He does have Nigel Clark to come and end the debate, to close out the debate. But yes.
Yeah. By the way, can I?
I don't think. Hold on, Khalil. I don't think Donovan was finished. You finished?
Yeah. No. Just that. I mean, all in all, good presentation. He hit all the points. I wanted a little bit more support for entrepreneurship, as Khalil said. But in managing my expectations, I think it, went well.
Okay. Khalil, you wanted to say something?
Yes, on the order of the debates. I've been wondering why the debates are structured in the way that they are. So you have the finance minister, then the opposition spokesman on finance, then the opposition leader, then the prime minister, then the finance minister closes it out. And I know this is the way it's traditionally done, but I think it's a bit strange that the prime minister, so the opposition spokesman on finance speaks, followed directly by the opposition leader. They end up repeating each other quite a bit, and then nobody gets to rebut the prime minister. So I feel like the opposition leader and the prime minister should be swapped. That way the opposition leader gets an opportunity to rebut the prime minister, and then the finance minister closes things out
the debate.
Interesting that you raised that, because it was a conversation I was having with Siobhan, actually. Siobhan actually raised that he thought it was, a little wonky.
Right.
But there's you both spoke to entrepreneurship. There's a tool program.
Right. I wanted to ask a question as it relates to labor, because the Prime Minister said they don't see the need, or they don't want to get to a stage where we are constantly importing labor. And I wanted to get specifically your reaction, Kalila, as to what that might look for Jamaica if we get to that stage, having to import labor as opposed to doing the investments from now, trying to get our young people into the system so that we can actually have the workforce to satisfy that demand.
Well, one good thing, I think the Prime Minister did address that in his presentation. So there are specific programs on the heart for construction. There are, I think Ricardo just mentioned the tool program. Right. There are things that are going to incentivize people who currently don't have a job or don't have the skills to start taking up those jobs that are going to be created, because when he said $1 trillion in investment in public infrastructure over the next 5 years, that's going to require a massive amount of jobs, and we currently don't have the labor force to fulfill all of those jobs. However, we do have people who are sitting down doing nothing. And I can't remember the name of the program that they announced, but they said that they would be going into communities, finding people and signing them up for these programs, which I think is going to be very, very important, and will have the added benefit of combating crimes, because it's the idle minds are the devil's workshop, right? Yes. Give them something constructive to do, give them the training. As it stands now, if these projects start immediately, it doesn't seem that we have the required labor force But I think with the initiatives that are being put in place, we can have the required labor force. There may still be some need to import some workers, but not necessarily to the detriment of the Jamaican labor force.
And that program, Khalil, is called it's a kind of wonky name, the Community Action for Rewarding Engagement. But short, it's CARE. Yes.
There's so many acronyms.
I'm telling you, I'm losing track myself. And I wondered now, Dr. Spence, whether obviously there's a political imperative here, yes? The government has been slipping, and this presentation obviously was part of the effort to shore up his political stocks. When you assess that, how do you think it
But when you listen to the Prime Minister as well, what you heard was an attempt to clarify and to correct misinformation. And one of the things that I found particularly interesting in that presentation, and I'm sure you would have, all of you would have heard it, is his explanation about what happened in the public sector in terms of dealing with the public sector wage structure, and how that wasn't understood, and how the lack of understanding around the massiveness of it has not had the kind of impact that the government would have wanted. Because, as the government said, it moved the public sector wage bill by almost 100%. And it was extended to all public sector workers, but the kind of impact that the government would have wanted that to have was not felt because of the misinformation around it. And also because of the fact that people sometimes forget that politicians are also part of the public sector and are considered in the public sector wage negotiations. That's one. The other thing that I think he did pretty well in that was, to explain the same thing that you guys were talking about. Talking about the fact that if we don't get the mix of talent and skills in the economy right, we cannot move forward. So part of the productivity challenge he spoke to was the fact that we have to get workers who are more skilled, who are more talented, who are able to operate at a higher level to move the economy from low wage into a more productive one. And there were so many things in there that the text of his speech was very good in terms of laying out the craft, the future that is needed for us to move from a low-wage society to one where we can substantially change how we have lived since independence. And for me, that is what was instructive. It wasn't just the announcement of programs. It was that there's text there for analysis. There is substantial foundation there for us to understand how do we move our economy to the next level. And when I heard some of it, including the discussion on productivity, I said to myself, one of the things he articulated clearly was that productivity is not just about the worker. Their management is important to this, how workers are paid. And I think even as we talk about that's how you started off. It keeps clipping me. I get too excited. Even as you talk about the
minimum wage.
The minimum wage, one of the things we have to recognize is that we have to move wages and salaries up in order for us to also start talking about moving the economy up. We can't continue to pay people at a low wage. And one of the things the government can do to manage that is to move the minimum wage so that the private sector gets the message that they too have to start raising salaries. Remember, the government had said, they had pinned public sector salaries to 80% of what is in the private sector. So there's a lot that, if we look at all of this and do the analysis, there's a lot that is implicated in the presentation. But we all have
gentlemen,
understand what it says.
Yes, Michelle.
Sorry,
is,
I know,
no, that's fine. Michelle is giving me the side eye. That's all the time we have. But I think, Dr. Spence, you hit the nail on the head, and that's what I said in what's in my mind. I heard vision in the presentation, an articulation of a vision. Kalila Reynolds, Dr. Nadine Spence, Donovan Wignall. Thank you so much for your time as always. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right.
The Prime Minister also announced in his budget presentation an initiative through the Heart Trust NSTA to reach those young people not equipped to compete in the labour force. The initiative, dubbed the Community Action for Rewarding Engagement or CARE initiative, will provide a grant to those enrolled in the various programs offered by Heart. The Prime Minister says the current shortage of skilled labour is to be regarded as a national emergency, and he's now enabling the Heart NSTA Trust to address that emergency. Each member of parliament will be asked to identify 30 young persons from their constituency for the program. For some reactions from young people, we are joined by public commentator and economist Sandra Roden and debater and student leader Ronaldina McLean. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning to you and your
Good morning.
Good. Let me start with you, Sandra. Your reactions to the budget presentation, specifically the initiatives geared towards young people.
I think it's a very good initiative, and it's been a long time persons have been asked for other strategies to deal with the unattachment of youth, especially in communities where there's high crime. And we know that in high crime communities, it's a lot of young people that are perpetrators of the crime because they are finding it hard to find other opportunities and to do other things that can be financially beneficial to them. Now, if it works according to how it's stated in the Prime Minister's speech, we should see a reduction in crime and a overall impact on youth in the society. But that is if it works according to how it said it should work. I don't know if the Member of Parliament selecting the 30 youth is the best thing. I don't know if there are other methodologies that we could use for that. But for now, this is a methodology, and I really hope it's something that works and works properly, and that young people who have not been engaged can be engaged, and we can also solve skills and labor crisis that we have now, because that is having an impact on the economy and our productivity.
You said a while ago, Sandri, that you're not sure going through the members of parliament is the best way to identify or to get those persons on board. Why do you say that?
I think that because overall we are a country that is normally politically charged, and that's something that we have to take into consideration. We don't want it to be the case in any way, shape, or form where there is any political leading that's attached to any particular program. That's just a fact. So I believe that as a country we have ministry dealing with youth. We have different mechanisms and metrics for how we notify people or how people in our society. And I believe that when we start implementing programs like this, even if we do it at the constituency level, I really hope that there are checks and balances in place to ensure that that type of political nature isn't applied to any of these programs.
Mm-hmm. Ronaldino, what's your take on it? Will young people actually take this up through their members of parliament and be a part of this program?
Yeah, morning, Saeed, morning, Ricardo, morning to your listeners. I think we will see that. I think we will definitely see that happening. I think it's an excellent initiative. I think what I'm looking forward to going into the future is actually for the program to be, greater expanded beyond the limits that exist for each member of parliament. Because what is it, 30 right now per MP? It's really not a big number for all the people who could immensely benefit from such a program, and I think will want to. Broadly though, I think the program shows that the government is kind of paying serious attention to the shortage of skilled labor that exists in our country, as it's increasingly becoming really the top issue of our time. And for years now, definitely last year, we were hearing growing calls on the government to do all kinds of things like increase immigration access for foreign workers and so on. And in the face even of evidence showing that lots of those other things are helpful and useful and could help the problem, this action by the government to kind of build out our ability to upskill our own local talent, our own local workers, shows creativity, it shows initiative, and it's a commendable thing, I think.
Mm-hmm. And just to put some numbers there, it would be if each member of parliament brings 30 persons for the program, it would be approximately 1,890 persons that would be impacted. But, gentlemen, I want to ask you as well, because the Prime Minister announced what he's called the Jamaica 60 Hope for Children Trust Fund. And that trust fund, listeners, viewers, which will be seeded by annual government contributions and open to private donations, will be accessible by any child born on or after the 60th anniversary of independence who is on path or is a ward of the state. What do you make of that as well? Sandre?
Well, we've been having calls over the years for some type of initiative to help young people who don't have that type of access. This is one initiative, even though it seems like a more long-term plan. It's one initiative that seems like it can take root. I still believe that other initiatives that relate to funding, education, etc., are initiatives that would have led to this initiative, because you noted that they stated that it would be for business, if they want to start a business, if they want to start investing, if they want to start their home, if they want to...
Could you shift a little bit, Sandre? The line is going a little bad.
Are you hearing me better now?
Yes, go ahead.
Right. So I'm saying they said that this initiative could aid in whatever these young people would want to do as they turn the age of 18. Now, what's good about it is that it's not just the wholesale focus on, we give you a university degree. It's a focus on other areas that they can tap into, whether they want to become entrepreneurs, become persons with skills, start their businesses, etc., which is good. I really hope, though, that the implementation can be widespread, because, as we've said, the CARE initiative will impact about 1,900 people roughly. But we hope that seeing the timeline for this and the long-term effect that it will have, that it's implemented in a meaningful way, and we can see a change in society with an initiative like this.
Mm-hmm. And Ronald, when you consider the Prime Minister's presentation as a whole, what would be your assessment of it?
I think it was wonderful. I think it was comprehensive. I think it was well structured. I think it shows that the Prime Minister understands the assignment before him. He understands what he calls the pain point issues. He understands what many perceive to be historically a one-sided approach by successive JLP governments to focusing on macroeconomic development and stability at the expense of social development and social progress. And he articulated yesterday a robust, philosophical alignment of his administration to the day. And I think that was good. That was very useful. I love that he detailed in a methodical way the things that his administration has done over the past maybe 8 years that may be useful to remind people about the programs that they're actively working on. And he had, obviously some of which we're talking about, lots of these, nice, well thought out, I think, policies, programs, strategies for how to, turn and shift, focus on new issues that arise in the present day and that people want to see addressed and told them in the last election that they need to see dealt with.
So if you had to grade him out of 10, what would be your grade, Ronaldinho?
Oh, maybe I'd give him a solid 8 out of 10. I think it was a clinical presentation.
And you, Sandre, your grade?
I'll give him a 7 out of 10.
Your mark, Adi?
I believe, Ricardo, that it was a bit long, but yes. I know a lot of people would have expected to, hear the presentation for a lengthy time. But I agree with Ronaldinho on the point that he had to remind people about a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And he noted some very important points like the timeline of bureaucracy. I know that the opposition has a very strong point saying you guys had 8 years and you finally are looking at the climate initiatives that we wanted to see in energy. But you guys took too long. The opposition leader was strong on that. The Prime Minister came and hit back with the fact that bureaucracy is a major issue as it relates to the time things get to implementation.
Right.
And that was a very important thing to know, because both governments, PNP, JLP administrations have suffered from that. They've had plans, they've had initiatives, but it does take a while for it to get off the ground. But I think in general, the Prime Minister has touched a lot of points, but I'm sure there are other points he could have touched. And that is why I am not being critical. I'm saying that I believe it is a solid 7 out of 10. It was a good presentation. And I think leading into an election year, really and truly, it's a presentation that really sets a footing for where the government is to go. As I think that the opposition's presentation was a presentation that was definitely setting a footing for what an ex-PNP administration would do. So I think it was a good focus on the economy, but an even better focus on all aspects of our country and what needs to be done with our economic substance and what we have seen over the past 8 years as it relates to debt reduction and improvement in collection of taxes, etc.
Yeah. Sandra Roden, Ronaldino McLean, Jamaica. Gird your loins, because we're in for
a long 18 months.
An election campaign. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Said.
Thanks for having me.